But in the heart, a wish is just a dream. Time never waits, though harder it may seem. Don't you dare give in. Trust and fear won't wait until you try again. Oh, you'll never know until you reach the end. No use in letting go. If there was some other way to prove you'd make it, I wouldn't know. Until you try, you'll never know. You'll never know.
Hi, everybody. This is Richard Sachs. Happy New Year. We're here with Lost Arts Radio for 2019. I hope your year's starting out well so far. And on this special show, I wanted to introduce you to a new friend we have. And the way it came about is that I recently saw a very interesting video by a man named Jerry Day, who's done a lot of interesting stuff you're going to be hearing about in a few minutes here. And this particular video that I got to listen to, since I wasn't familiar with his work before that, was about smart meters and vaccines and how to employ certain legal strategies so that you'd be able to make your own choice on those things and not get coerced into either one of them. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. By the way, Jerry's site is, or the one I know about anyway, we'll hear if there's more, is freedomtaker.com. And so this one was about legal means you could use to avoid things you don't want for yourself or your family. And I was really interested and watched the whole thing right through. But I wondered about real-life application. And the same thing came up when I was watching the work of the InPower movement. And it came from Josh Del Sol and other people working with him. And that was, supposed to be a legal means to go ahead and have smart meters taken off or not put on. And the idea was it could be used, if it was successful there, it could be used against all these other things that people are being coerced into. But I've been watching it for at least a couple of years now, and I haven't really seen it get to the point of successful application. So it reminds me of this kind of analogy, well, not analogy, just kind of a symbolic picture of four cars arriving at a four-way stop sign. Or like you just get there in your car, and to the right of you, there's a big truck, and you know it's going to be a while before it stops all the way down and then keeps going. So you have the right of way, and you go because you were there first, and the truck ignores the stop sign and kills you. Now, you were completely right, and could certainly say that the truck violated the law and everything by ignoring the stop sign and the fact that you were there first. But it doesn't really matter if you're run over. So it really occurred to me that we have to check whether being right about something in a certain case will actually lead to physical level success. And I really wanted to ask Jerry about what he's learned about that whole area of finding out what's right and then actually doing it, and what happens to you in response. Because we know that we're under a government at all levels now that doesn't necessarily do anything according to what's legal. Anyway, I thought the best way would be is if we could ask Jerry and see what other work he's involved in, and look at the same thing. What do we do with these things that when we learn them to get successful application? And that's a big subject. So Jerry, fortunately, was nice enough to say he'd come on the show, and he's here with us tonight. And I just want to welcome him. Hope you're having a good 2019 so far, Jerry, and thanks for spending the time with us. I think it'll be a fun conversation we're going to have here.
Absolutely, Richard. Good to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah, so I always like to start, and we won't spend a lot of time on this, but I like to introduce people to you who know nothing about your work, because these shows are for newcomers, and also the people who are, really already involved in what we talk about. But if we just keep talking to them, the group that's aware of these issues doesn't grow. So I want to make it really friendly to the people who are starting from zero and say, go back as far as you want. We'll just take a few minutes before you got interested or knowledgeable about this stuff and how you got directed into it and what's going on.
Well, I got a smart meter or a threat of a smart meter in Burbank, California on my home. And, they were sneaking into my yard. I didn't know they were there, and I heard my dogs barking, and I'd come out, and they would start to get real hostile at me. And, I had one guy say, well, you have a microwave, don't you? Or you use a cell phone, don't you? Or something like that. Of course, my answer to him was, well, that would be my choice, wouldn't it? If I wanted to have some exposure to radio frequencies, in balance with some other benefit or something. When someone sneaks on my property without my permission, without my consent, and puts a radiation emitting fire hazard surveillance device on my property without my consent, that's a little bit different. So, I was obviously working at resisting this, and I was writing legal notices to the city. There's all kinds of legal, ways that you can deal with this with notices and whatnot. And, you've got a utility company that is absolutely trespassing, absolutely violating your rights, absolutely violating even their own easements, because their easements do not authorize them to commit crimes and to endanger families and to destroy people's health and to commit surveillance on people and to cause fires. You can't do that with an easement. An easement has to be compliant with the law. So, I'm sending them notices, and this went on for maybe 6 months or something, and my notices kept getting better and better. And I realized at a certain point, other people could use these notices, because basically what I was doing was putting the power company on notice that they were in criminal trespass. And if anything had happened, like a fire, these smart meters have no surge protectors. When you put the surveillance device in there, those are fine electronics, and they're flammable, and they can't withstand 2,000 to 20,000 volt surges, which are relatively common on grid lines. So they explode into flames. Tens of thousands of these fires have happened in California alone. So when they're doing this, you send them a notice and you say, get this off my property, and you have 30 days or I will replace it myself. That was my original notice. And I found electromechanical meters that I could replace this with, and I had one ready. And they just ignore you, and they just say, if you don't like our policies, we'll shut your electricity off. They're bullies. They don't listen to reason. My expectation, at least for about the first year of all this, was that when you tell someone that they're in criminal malfeasance and that you tell someone that they're committing public harm, and you provide all the scientific research they could possibly want to confirm that they would say, oh, well, okay, yeah, you got me. We are breaking the law, and what kind of meter would you like? Or, go ahead and put your own safe and lawful electromechanical meter on there. Sorry that we were breaking the law. But then it turns out not only are they breaking the law, but they don't care, and they think they're entitled to, and they're either criminally malfeasant or they're ignorant about their own policies. And the police will not support us in this. The police are even more ignorant. I'm sorry to say this, but I've seen these police in action. And if you don't like someone talking badly about police, you've got to tell police to stop doing what they're doing. They have arrested people for not complying with their utility company's policies. Now, you tell me how a police officer gets jurisdiction for that. That is a civil matter, and the violator is the trespasser, and they're arresting the victim. So if that's not about the bottom level of ignorance, I'm sorry. If you're a police officer, you listen to me. You are making a mistake. And if you come on my property like that, I will have a federal marshal put you in prison for trespass and coming on my property without a warrant. That's how it's going to work if you show up at my place. Now, luckily, nobody's going to be doing that because I'm off-grid now. I have solar, off-grid solar batteries. I have no utility bills, no relationship with a utility company of any kind. So other than internet service. So, that's, after getting fed up with this. So I've been hassling with this for maybe 6 years now. So what the story I was telling you about, my problems with my meter were going back 6 years.
Well, how did you even know the meters were bad? Most people don't know that,
All I knew initially was that the power company was starting to make noise like, oh, we're going to know your time of day use. You'll be able to see, when you turn on your hairdryer. You'll be able to know when your appliances are being used. And of course, they were saying I would know. Well, that was a lie. They would know. And they weren't providing any kind of reporting to me on when I'm using my appliances or any particular way that I could save electricity or that I could know more about my consumption, because the time of day usage, the data set that they were creating, they were keeping to themselves and selling to law enforcement. They're selling it to insurance companies, in case an insurance company would want to find you in violation of some homeowner's policy stipulation. So they were sharing and selling this information to strangers, but they didn't make any of this information available to me. And I realized, all you've got to do is say, wait a minute, let's read the Fourth Amendment of the Bill of Rights, secure in your homes, your papers, your privacy, whatever. Well, this is the most invasive, reach into the home, the private home, that has ever been attempted. And it's not one or two homes, it's every home. And it's like, it was so obvious to me that this was mass surveillance. And, they can tell. People want to say that this isn't possible, but I have seen how they do this. They can tell every appliance you're using every minute of the day. They have what's called current draw profiles that they look at, and they know what a hairdryer looks like. They know what a washing machine looks like. They know what a tea kettle, electric stove looks like. They know what these appliances look like in the current draw, and they have algorithms to literally parse that data and say, here's when, Richard turned on his bathroom heater. And that's 24/7 surveillance. You couldn't get a warrant to do that unless someone was a major criminal. This is data of your personal living habits that is so, like, okay, here's an example. 3 years ago, August 9th, 3 p.m, where were you? What were you doing? Do you know? That's 3 years ago, August 9th, 3 p.m. Okay.
No.
Your power company knows. They know where you were. They know where you were in your house, what you were using in your house, and they can tell law enforcement that, or your spouse's divorce lawyer that, or anybody that'll pay for that data, they'll tell them. So, they are remembering more about your life than you possibly could remember yourself. So is this not mass surveillance? Is this not deeply high resolution surveillance? And so when they described the meter and the kind of data that they would be collecting, I immediately knew that this was absolutely illegal. And these were criminals that were proposing and doing this. And so I made a video. I didn't accuse anybody of being a criminal. I just told people, you're about to get spied on. It was that my first video went to about 2 million views. And then YouTube decided that was enough views, and it just flatlined after that. But, this business that your meter is spying on you turned out to be a tremendously viral piece of information. And people were going, oh, my God, it's right. When you see this video, I describe it, and they go, well, they were sticking this thing on the side of my house, but I had no idea. People don't pay attention to what these things do and what they are, and they're not listening to their power company. They're not reading the little pamphlets that come with their utility bill. And a lot of people didn't really understand this until they saw this particular first video that I did. But the first video I did was all about surveillance. It didn't even cover any of the other problems with these meters, which are major. Like I say, fire hazard with without not having surge protectors, and the dirty electricity is caused by the switching mode power supply. They have to steal some electricity from you to power their surveillance device. And so stealing electricity comes in the form of a switching mode power supply, which is like a little transformer, but it doesn't work like a transformer. It works by shutting electricity on and off, like, hundreds of times a minute. And I didn't know this because I'm not an electrical engineer. I discovered this researching this, that if you turn an electric source on and off fast enough, like you have a 100 volt source, and you turn it on and off very quickly, and it's off 50% of the time, you now have what's equivalent to a 50 volt source. So you've cut the voltage in half just by not delivering it half the time. But if it's on a very high frequency, and the electronics see that as 50 volts, not 100 volts, that's a switching mode power supply. Well, they put one of those in your surveillance device, in your utility meter, and they're disrupting your incoming current sine wave. It's like putting a stick in a stream. It creates turbulence in the electrical flow.
So that would mean more dirty electricity, right?
Exactly. Transients, dirty electricity, obviously health problems, obviously damage to your appliances, and especially your electronic devices. It's something that people spend good money to put a line conditioner on their house just to correct that problem. I had a video editing system some years before that wasn't working right, and it turns out all it was dirty electricity on a bad circuit on my house circuit. It was not as big a problem as the device in the smart meter causes, and that was causing my computer, my video editing system, to not function. So this is, the electronics really do sense this and really do react to it, and it does damage electronic appliances and gadgets and things like that. But it's also putting out this dirty electricity, which is making people sick. And there's about 20% of the population who are electromagnetic sensitive. Obviously, not all those people know they're electromagnetic sensitive. This is a new epidemic, you might say, now that we're saturated with wireless radiation all around us, especially in urban areas. And so, people don't know why they're getting sick, and they just blame it on, the chemtrails, or they blame it on, their diet, or they blame it on something else. And they say, well, I'm getting old or whatever. No, you're getting bombarded with wireless radiation, dirty electricity, all kinds of electromagnetic disruptions that are known to cause biological issues.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Did I not conclude that properly? I'm not sure where I was heading there, actually.
No, that was good. A couple of things that came up. One is that you were talking about writing notices to the power companies. Did you just construct these yourself, or did you have some legal background experience, or how did you do that?
I don't have any legal background per se, other than I've had, a usual share of traffic tickets and whatever. I've had a little 5-year difference of opinion with the IRS, which taught me a lot about notices and legal issues. I've had a few encounters. I sued Los Angeles County for defamation when they notified my bank that I was a deadbeat taxpayer when they had made the mistake on the tax bill. And this was a property tax bill. And my bank started to levy impound fees and account fees and all kinds of things, because the county of Los Angeles was reporting that I had overdue and delinquent property taxes. And of course, as soon as I got a bill on that, I called them and I said, "What is this?" And they said, "Oh, we made a mistake. I'm sorry. Don't worry about it. You don't have to pay it. We can't take your home for 5 years. And by that time, we'll get it sorted out." And I said, 5 years? I said, this is going on my credit rating. And so they said, "Oh, don't worry, yeah." And so obviously I'm not going to pay it. It was $750 that they had made a mistake on. They sent me what they call a supplemental tax bill. So it's like after you pay your property tax, you get another bill for supplemental, whatever that means.
You're saying IRS is the person you're talking to, right? This was
the county, Los Angeles County tax assessor, the property tax assessor.
Okay.
So the taxing agents, both the IRS and LA County property tax, have gotten around to making errors that damaged me, and I've had to battle with them. And I just sued them in small claims court, and for maximum amount at the time was $5,000, and I easily won. I just showed what they had done and their admission that it was their error. And what I found out, and this is an interesting little tidbit of information, I interviewed one of these county tax assessor employees on the phone, and I said, "How did my bank find out about this supposedly delinquent tax bill that you've admitted is an error? How did a false error that you know is an error, how did that get reported? Why wasn't that withheld from the bank?" And they said, "Oh no, we can't withhold it." They said the minute that we issue a tax form, a statement, or whatever it is, it pipelines to all the banks and the credit reporting agency. I said, "What do you mean pipelines?" They say they get it immediately. So in other words, banks, major banks especially, but I think all banks and credit reporting agencies are on the same computer with county tax collectors. That if you think your tax collection business is private, it's not only shared with anyone. This means it could be hackable or go anywhere in the world.
Sure.
It's not only shared, it's shared in real time. So the instant that the county of Los Angeles puts something down on paper, every bank and every credit reporting agency immediately has it in their computer on their screens. And I said, well, there's no lag. When you know you've committed an error, once you've committed, it's already too late to withhold it. And they said, yes. They said, we can't stop this. And so when I went into court, I said, they're not protecting taxpayers. They're not protecting their own mistakes. They're not correcting their errors, and they're allowing it to be immediately broadcast to the entire world when they do make a mistake. And so the court said, oh, well, that's, and then that did cause damage to me because my bank is now penalizing me. So there's defamation with damages. So the court said, sure, you win. And that's when I learned a great deal about the legal process, because there was an automatic appeal by the county. The county appeals every ruling that's made against it. And I will say, without any fear of lying, because I have, or defaming anyone, because I have the black and white evidence of this, the judge that they got in for the appeal hearing was corrupt and just heard my case, just like the small claims court judge heard it. Yeah. Showed him my evidence, and he says, I'm not going to tell you anything today. You'll get something in the mail within 30 days. Well, I knew right away that wasn't good. Right. And sure enough, in the mail, after the hearing is over, and when I have no further opportunity to confront anyone about this, they say, oh, we've just reversed your ruling. We're not going to tell you why. We're not going to justify that legally. We're not going to cite any law. We're just reversing it. You lose. And that's the whole story.
Now, that's not legal for the judge to operate that way, is it?
No, of course not. If they're going to reverse a ruling, they have to disclose on the basis of what law or what argument by the opposing side.
Well, and it really needs to be while you're there in person. Well,
not in their opinion. We have courts that are so far now from constitutional process that it doesn't even resemble a constitutional courts anymore. They're corporate courts, and they make up their own rules. I mean, if you were operating strictly constitutionally, you couldn't have such a thing as an infraction, prosecuted criminally. And they do it every day, hundreds of times a day. They turn that into a government revenue stream. So we're far outside of the constitutional constraints, we're in an illegal system. This was this experience. The final punchline on this was that this is when I learned on this little suing the Los Angeles County business that in small claims court, the plaintiff has no right of appeal, but the defendant does. And so the county County of Los Angeles, systematically uses that to reverse every ruling that's ever been made against them.
Well, they may figure that nobody has enough money to keep fighting them anyway, right?
It doesn't matter how much money you've got. You have no right of appeal if you came out of small claims.
So once they get any decision in their favor, then it's all over.
From small claims, because in regular court you have right of appeal. You know, when you go to superior court or district court, you have right of appeal. But small claims, the plaintiff does not have right of appeal. It turns it into basically a kangaroo court where the defendant has an extreme advantage. And when the defendant not only has that advantage, but can also install the judge that it wants to make the ruling,
right.
You know, it's a county judge, you know, and I'm suing the county. The conflict of interest is glaring, you know, or, you know, even if it's a state judge, it's a conflict of interest. So you know, when you get slapped down like this on completely criminal, unconstitutional violations of due process, you know, it starts to sink in that, you know, what kind of situation we're in legally. This is something that is very, very vividly demonstrated with the utility companies, with these meters, because you do not have any legal recourse in practical terms. You know, the police are completely ignorant about the issues of the radiation and the biological hazards. Mm-hmm. They're completely ignorant about the fire hazard. They're ignorant about everything. My understanding is, and this is hearsay that I cannot support, but I've heard reports that the utility companies pressure the fire departments and the fire inspectors. When your utility meter explodes in flames, which has happened, as I said, tens of thousands of times, people have died, homes have been destroyed, and obviously, you know, a lot of trauma and damage and cost. When that happens to you, the utility companies are pressuring the fire departments and the fire inspectors to report that as your wiring, not their meter. So you'll get a false report on a fire inspection after the damage has been done. And your insurance company would say, oops, that's not the meter. We're not holding the utility company liable. That's your wiring. That's your fault. Not only is that on your insurance policy, but we don't cover it. You know,
right.
So, you know.
Right. I've heard reports of the utility companies showing up right after a fire and taking the meter away.
Yeah, they'll destroy. They'll tamper with evidence, and nobody prosecutes them for that. That's a felony. You know. So what are we doing there? Oh, it's amazing. You know what these power companies are allowed to get away with. I mean, it's to the point where law enforcement itself is criminally complicit with felonies.
Right.
It's
right. So
you know, when are we, you know, going to get a change? You know, it's like, how bad can it get?
Well, yeah. So what happened after you first thought of these notices that you could give the utility company and why they make sense and they're legal and everything? What happened when you started realizing that you may be right, but it didn't matter? Well,
whether it matters or not, here's that was immediate, you know, because, and I kept sending them more and more powerful legal statements, and it's like, okay, I knew that these were criminals. I mean, my city council in Burbank was the regulator. I called the California Public Utilities Commission, and they said, oh no, your regulator is your city council. We don't have any jurisdiction there at all.
Okay.
And I went, really? I didn't know that in the state of California, the State Public Utility Commission had areas where it didn't have jurisdiction. It said, yeah, we don't touch Burbank. And I spoke to an engineer at Burbank about this problem, an engineer in the utility company, Burbank Water and Power. Mm-hmm. And he told me, well, the Burbank City Council and the Burbank city government was illegally taking money out of the power company. They built a power company. Burbank Water and Power supplies 5 cities with power. It is a for-profit enterprise. The city of Burbank is a for-profit industrial enterprise. And they illegally take money out of this because you can imagine the amount of revenue that represents 5 cities, all the electric bills every month. So that was what was reported to me. And I want to call that hearsay because I don't want to be held liable to prove that. Obviously, this engineer was not anxious to provide the hard evidence of that. We were just having a conversation where he said, yes, they're taking revenue from this. So I knew that I had a corrupt city council. And I would go to the city council meetings and I would make a presentation. They give you 3 minutes to talk.
Yeah, right.
And I would lay all this out and how bad the meters were and the health effects and whatever. There were other people doing it too. There were people who were electromagnetic sensitive who had been damaged by this, who were there basically in a damaged state, trying to figure out how to protect themselves as well. And these city council members would just look at us like with these blank looks on their faces. So I understood this particular look, which is just like staring at you like, okay, and then you're done and they go, thank you, next.
Yeah, exactly. I've had the same exact experience.
They're absolutely corrupt. That is an indicator. I mean, if you didn't hear this, if you didn't want to make a comment on it, if you didn't want to defend that I just accused you of being a felonious criminal violating your oath of service to the citizens of your city, if you don't want to even comment on that or defend yourself, you have a problem. And
right. Well, I think they've set up the policy so that they can't comment during that section, right?
Well, it's not that they can't. It's called the Brown Act, and it says they don't have to. They can comment anytime they want, but the Brown Act supposedly gives them this privilege to not respond to any public comment that they choose to not respond to. And
my experience was that they're texting on their cell phones and not even listening to the people talking a lot of times. Sure.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, regardless of whether they're courteous or rude, that's I see that as another issue. When you're standing before them and bringing evidence and facts of their own violations, the rudeness is a side issue. You want to play with your cell phone. They might do that while the Boy Scouts are giving out some honor to an Eagle Scout. They do that in the city council. They'll have some fluff. They'll do nice, civic happiness. And if they're using their cell phones during that, that's rude. If they're using their cell phones while they're being illustrated as criminals, the use of the cell phone and the rudeness is just a side issue as far as I'm concerned. I don't care if you're using your cell phone because I'm delivering the information that the public needs to hear, and it's going out on closed circuit television to the entire community. And so you can play on your cell phone all I want. I don't care. It's my 3 minutes.
Right. Okay. So you started realizing, I guess, that, I wanted to interject one question. You said that the city of Burbank, and I'm sure pretty much all cities in America and a lot of other places, is a for-profit company. When they make profit by selling power to other cities or things like that, where does that go and how does it get to individuals benefiting from that money?
Well, you're asking me, how they slip money around under the table, inside a municipality, inside a city government. And I'm not going to even presume to tell you I have the slightest clue how they work their finances and how they do that. All I told you everything I know, which is an engineer disclosed to me that, I think the engineer had a little bit of personal resentment because you have to run a power company. You have to have a budget. And when you start seeing money disappearing down a black hole, and now you can't do your maintenance, and the rate structures and whatnot are supposed to be transparent. And so the engineers should be able to look at that and say, okay, we have a budget of X, Y, or Z, and we have maintenance costs of X, Y, or Z. And things weren't penciling out for this poor guy, and he was a little frustrated, I believe. But as far as how all of that is set up fiscally and how they transfer funds and how an dishonest public employee would facilitate that, I'm certainly not any kind of expert on that.
So once you started realizing that you could be right in all these things and they had the mechanism to shut you down and ignore you anyway,
Yep.
What was your next thought about a good strategy to pursue?
Well, what I did is I put up this website, freedomtaker.com, and I started posting these documents. See, the documents, you could say, and like you said at the beginning, the In Power movement, my documents, you could say that many of these documents did not have any particular effect. Well, I would argue that they absolutely did, every single one of them. And here's how. When you identify someone as violating your rights and you don't say anything, you are agreeing to have your rights violated. It actually comes under an easement contract. If your neighbor comes over to your yard and takes roses off of your rose bush and you see him do it and you don't say anything, your neighbor has just established the right to take your roses. Right. That's kind of easement law. You have to state your position. And so the notices that I wrote up and that In Power wrote up, by the way, I don't know if you know, In Power contacted me and asked to use my notice as a template for starting their notices. So we have a very similar approach. And
okay.
The way that we differ, and I support everything In Power does. I think they're fantastic. I love Josh Del Sol. He's a tremendous human being, right. And we are good friends. The difference between In Power and what I did was In Power went toward the idea of notice of liability and making public officials liable for the damage they cause and for the crimes they commit. Right. And his approach was to force them to retire. You'll never prosecute them. The system just doesn't prosecute itself, you might say. Right. So people don't get, you and I get prosecuted. Public officials just retire and they avoid charges somehow. And, we've seen that all the way up and down the ladder. So In Power's idea was to have public officials retire. And the thinking was that obviously they're losing their livelihood. They're going to still collect their pensions and they'll still get other work in the industry. So it's not like anybody got hurt. But supposedly the public specter of forcing someone into retirement is going to be an incentive or some kind of a motivator for other people taking the position who don't want to be humiliated and shamed in that same way. Whether or not that's working, I don't know, because I don't follow that very closely. And I would recommend anyone who's interested in how that's working to go to the In Power movement. Right. I think you get there through takebackyourpower.org or something.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is not just looking at ways to make officials retire, but there are many stages in their legal process that they're saying is the way to go. And my understanding after watching them for a long time is that in the final stages, if there's no objection to what they're establishing with their notice, then the city or whatever entity they're after owes them a vast amount of money. And the theory is that they're going to be able to collect it.
Well, that's great, and I hope they do, and I hope they can. The premise that I take, the approach I take has a certain ethical framework to it. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with In Power. I think that's terrific, and you need to put all the leverage you can on them. Mm-hmm. I'm not, Josh, and is it Washington? What's his name? The other man?
Cal
Washington.
Right.
They have a team. They have more budget than I do. They have different aspirations, and they're great. Yeah. I am limited. I'm one guy. I don't make money on this. I have a few products related to protecting yourself from the meter on these websites. I'll tell you about that. But it's not a big money maker, and it probably never will be. But what I do, I think, is sort of, you might call it the critical first step. And that is what I was describing a minute ago. If you do not inform the person stealing the roses off your rose bush that they are not welcome to do that, mm-hmm. you are granting them permission to do it. And it's kind of a weird law, because it establishes their right by their own actions. And that's a little creepy, you know.
Well, it is. I mean, it makes you wonder where that kind of a law came from.
Yeah, well, it may even have emerged early from common law. It's kind of an honor system where if I've allowed you to take roses from my rose garden, and then suddenly one day say, no, you can't, you have the expectation that you could, and now you have a party, and you need some roses for your vase, and now the mean guy is saying, oh, I've changed my mind, and you can't do that, even though you had an expectation that you'd have roses for your party. So the power company is trying to create the expectation that they can violate your rights, they can endanger your health, they can harm you, they can make you sick, they can burn down your house, and that's okay. And it's a lot more serious than someone stealing roses off your bush. But it's the same exact principle. They're establishing that as an element of their easement. And if you make the mistake of not providing notice to them and saying, no, you cannot violate the law, no, you cannot endanger and harm me, no, you cannot do these things, and put that on notice and send that with proof of service by certified mail, and in some cases you can use notaries or this or that. It depends on what the legal situation is. But at the very minimum, to the authorized party of the utility company, the chief executive officer, the chairman of the board, whoever's making top policy decisions, address it personally to that person, and you say, you are breaking the law by doing this, this, and this. I don't accept that. If any harm comes, you will be fully personally liable for that harm. You know, all these things, and you must respond and rebut within 30 days, or I'll default you on this, and then it's game over. You agree to my terms. And by the way, when you send these notices, they can't rebut. They never do rebut. We've sent out thousands of notices. I've had thousands of downloads of this document and personally talked on the phone with literally thousands of people who were doing this process and sending this notice. Not once in 6 years has one power company even attempted to rebut the allegations of criminal trespass that we make. They don't deny it. They don't rebut it. They don't address it. They send you a letter back and saying, oh, well, if that's how you feel, we'll cut off your electricity.
Yeah.
So nobody's rebutting this. So there's no denial.
And then by the same principle, if they send you the letter offering to cut off your power, you can send them a letter back saying, well, you can cut off my power if you follow the following conditions, right? Something like that.
Well, here's what I did. Because, you know, you can threaten them and go back and forth all day long. Ultimately, if you refuse their meter, which is what we were advising, we didn't know what else to do for 5 years. Yeah. They'll just cut off your electricity. Nobody's going to prosecute them. Police have no idea what's going on here. The courts, get this, the judges are very wealthy people. Judges, you may not know this, manage their own pension funds. They don't have pension fund managers. If you're a judge, you can make laws and rules to benefit yourself. They get to manage their own pension funds, and they have a constant stream of money coming into them from every conviction that they do. Everything they do in the court is a revenue generator into the judge's own pension fund.
Can you explain how that works? Because most people, that wouldn't make any sense. I mean, the judge is getting a salary of a certain amount from the municipality. I mean, how is it that the judge makes money typically from the cases? The
judges are paid with a percentage from what revenues come into the court. And if you sit and watch a court, especially a traffic court, it's revenue. It's dollars every day. They get dollars from attorneys, from plaintiffs, from defendants. Everybody pays to play the game of let's pretend like we're administering justice. Right. We're not administering justice. We're collecting revenues. Okay. So when a judge collects this revenue, now, by the way that they circumvent the idea that this is a conflict of interest. You know, if I convict you, I make money. Conflict of interest. Okay, the way they circumvent that is they say, I don't get any money when I convict you. It just goes into my pension fund that I get later.
Which is a separate legal entity, basically, right?
Right. You know, they legally separate
it's not the judge, yeah.
So they can convince themselves and others that this is not a conflict of interest. It's hideous conflict of interest. It's their revenue.
So they're paid as a percentage of what comes into the court, right?
I don't know. I'm not going to claim that I know the fiscal details of how courts are financed or funds are transferred, but I can tell you that a judge who works in a court that collects a lot of money has a higher income, especially possibly exclusively into his pension fund, than a judge that works in a low revenue court. Okay, right, so the revenues of the court do determine the either the salary scale and or the pension revenues. And the pension revenues are sort of unlimited. You think that you'd say, okay, a judge should have a certain pension, and by this time it'll reach maturity, and they'll get X dollars a month. No, they just keep putting money in, and however much money is in there, but when they retire, is how much they get a month. They calculate that out, or the dividends from the investments or whatever. It's theirs. It just starts to go into their pocket instead of stay in the pension fund. This goes back to the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report that Walter Burien discovered. Do you know that story?
I'm totally familiar. We've had Clint Richardson on the show and people like that.
Right. So the judges, Walter Burien discovered the judges were managing their own pension funds and were the richest people in town, and they just hired him as a financial advisor. And he said, well, you've got enough money, you could all retire tomorrow. And within 6 months after he told them that, half of them had retired. They didn't even know what this meant, all this money. They had more money than they understood, these judges. And so there's huge money flows going directly into these pension funds. The corruption and the conflict of interest is beyond the imagination of the average person.
So Walter Burien was a financial consultant to the judges?
I think an investment advisor, I believe.
Okay, and that's how he learned about the whole system that's going on, right?
Right, but the bottom line that comes down to with the smart meters is that what are they doing with all this money? They're investing it in big industry. In what? Power companies. So these judges' pension funds are invested in the defendant when you come in and sue them, and the judges figure, I don't have to disclose this because that's my pension fund and there's no conflict of interest.
Yeah, that's the beauty of a corporation, is it's not you.
So you're going to go into court not knowing that your judge has a huge conflict of interest, and the judge is going to sit there pretending and maybe convincing himself that it's really not moral or ethical that they need to disclose this conflict of interest. Of course, it's pure corruption. So this is how your courts operate. So when you go into court, you're basically the person adjudicating the case is basically a major investor in your legal opponent.
Do you want to give people a little bit bigger picture of what you found out about what you called the CAFR? Because most of the current audience probably never heard of it.
Sure. Well, that was the story. Walter Burien was hired by these judges, and he discovered that not only that the judges were vastly wealthy and were beyond the wealth they had was beyond their own understanding. It was just judges make huge amounts of money, and no one knows this. But what Walter Burien discovered as he went down the rabbit hole after discovering that was that basically, I'll summarize this, 2/3 of the revenues that go into all of government do not get applied to any public service or anything you know about. At least 2/3 of the money that you pay in taxes just disappears. It vanishes. I worked for a city recreation department when I was very young. I was teaching classes, recreational classes.
Yeah.
And I saw, my department manager told me to my face, he said, Jerry, our problem is not providing services. If we stopped providing services tomorrow, there's nobody that could do anything about it. And that money would still come in. He said, our problem is getting rid of the money and making it look like we need the funding again next year. So our job here is to disappear money. And it doesn't matter if it's productive. It doesn't matter if it disappears in an honest or transparent way. It just has to go away, and we have to be able to tell somebody that we spent it. And that way, we'll get the same budget next year or more. And so that was hair-raising to me. You know, it was an example that government is fake. It doesn't need all the money it gets. It probably hardly needs any of it. And then Walter Burien found out by auditing governments that they were disappearing 2/3 of the money. Now, what they would do with the money, he found, was to put it in fake accounts. So there would be a rainy day account. There would be a future maintenance account. There would be a pension fund. There would be this, that. You can make up any kind of we have to have an account just in case this happens. Right. So there's $40 million sitting doing nothing for the taxpayer as long as they want it. Now, what were they doing this for? Well, that $40 million was some agencies, you got 5 people working in some, 30th floor bureaucratic office that have some title that nobody understands. Mm-hmm. And if budgets get tight, they're likely to say, well, can we cut this? And of course we can cut that. They're not doing anything that anybody even knows what they're doing. They're pushing paper in an office. They're useless. Right. They're wasting money. Their job is to get rid of money. So of course we can cut it. And their protection from that is to take as much money as they can and pack it away in their own accounts so that when somebody cuts their budget, they just keep paying themselves their wages and they just keep their agency doors open and they just pretend like, okay, I did a video about this where Walter Burien explained this to me, to where Los Angeles had a big budget problem. They're screaming about every penny and they're running out of money. And then they come up with, I don't know, $1.5 billion to reconcile some budget issue. Yeah, I described it this was video I did a couple years ago. I can't remember the details, but boom, here comes $1.5 billion out of a budget that was supposedly dire in its bankruptcy, and the theme is to constantly tell the public we're running out of money. We're running out of money. How they did this was they would just hide money, and they would say it's like, I like to say it like it's a budget. It's not an account. It's a budget. The CAFR is the account, the secret accounts. That's where all the money is. If you go, and I did this, I went into Burbank City Hall. I said, I want to see the accounts. I want to see, what money the city's got coming and going, debits and credits, debts and assets.
And they showed you the budget, right?
You've been, you're a hip guy. That's it. They hand you the budget, and it's 1.5 inches thick, and it's totally incomprehensible to most people. And I like to say, like, if you have a grocery budget for the month of $300 and you spend $320, you're not broke, you're not bankrupt. You just take money out of the bank and spend the $20 extra. Right. Your accounts are in the bank. Your budget is what you've decided you want to pay for groceries. So a budget is a made-up thing, and that's all the city is going to tell you about or the government agency is their budget, because it's just all fiction. It's all fantasy, right. And you can't sort that out no matter what. If anybody's going to audit a city, they don't care what the budget says. They don't even look at it. They look at the accounts, which is the comprehensive annual financial report, and every government agency has that. And you'll notice on the weekly news, if they're talking about any financial item relative to the city, it's the budget. It's the budget. It's the budget. They repeat that word over and over as if that's the accounts. It's like saying the stock market is an indicator of the economy. The stock market is a gambling casino. It has really nothing to do with the economy. And the real indicators are, employment and cost of living and, different trends with commodity values and manufactured goods, the pre-orders for manufactured goods. Those are the things that really indicate what the economy is doing. Hardly ever on a layman's news show do they tell you about those real things. It's all about the budget and the stock market, So we're all just getting bad information constantly all day, thinking we're getting something real.
Right. So how did the timing fit together between finding out about the CAFR and finding out about what's going on with the smart meters.
Yeah, the CAFR was later, and just to pick up the story on what we're doing with the smart meters. So the notice, the notice is very important, because if the power company violates your rights, that's breaking the law, violating your rights, or if they make you sick, or if they cause your death, or if they burn down your house, that could be considered negligence. That could be considered an accident. That could be considered a random coincidence. If you send them a notice that says, you're putting me in hazard of burning down my house, making me sick, and giving me cancer, and you're doing it this way, according to these scientific reports, according to this scientific information about the biological effects of radiation, according to this fact about homes burned down by smart meters. In one day in Stockton, California, 5,000 homes were burned by smart meters. One day when one guy hit a phone pole with a truck, a delivery truck, and it blew a transformer. Boom, 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 down the line. 5,000 homes, and that was reported on CBS News. It was big news in Stockton. They couldn't avoid it.
This would not have happened with analog meters, right?
It can't happen, no. Yeah. Analog meters have surge protectors and no electronics in them. Electronics are flammable. They explode when they get a surge. So no, you put a surveillance device in there. You might as well, and what they did was they might as well take out the surge protector. It's not going to help. With a surge protector in there, the electronics are too close to the surge. There's no way to prevent it. There's no way to prevent the fire. So the surge protector, by putting a surveillance device into a smart meter, you are completely defeating the effect of the surge protector. And so, and the engineers know this. Imagine what it's like to be an engineer and have to design this, and you go to your boss and you go, "We're going to burn houses down." And the engineer says, "Yeah, design it, or I'll have another engineer design it."
Exactly. Yeah.
Imagine, they know what they're doing. I know, I'm not an engineer. It's obvious, after looking into this for a number of years, anybody with basic understanding of electricity or science or physics or, just basic understanding, it's very obvious. And so these engineers are knowingly and deliberately designing meters that they know will harm people, and everybody's probably trying to work hard to keep their name off of the log of who designed it, who marketed it, who's promoting it. You probably find very few actual human names in that whole chain of record. At least unless they're crazy, and they're so self-delusional that they, have convinced themselves that somehow this is all right. Yeah, many people in the utility industry are like that. It's very scary.
Yeah, especially at higher levels, I think.
But, there's a tremendous amount of ignorance at lower levels because they're not encouraged to research this. There's an expression that it's very hard to explain or to make someone understand something when their salary depends on them not understanding it.
Exactly.
And that's the situation that most people who work for utility companies are in. If they dare to go out on the web and just Google smart meter and come up with some negative information, and they have to reconcile their conscience with what they're telling people every day on the phone, as a customer service.
Yeah. Because they're just reading a script. I know the customer service people at the power companies have no idea what, most of them, I don't think, what they're talking about. And they just read off, I think a positive help for them to get hired is not knowing anything about it.
Right.
So that they don't have a conflict, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, no question that human resources at any power company would ask you, a little bit about what you know about meters and electronics. And if you say the first thing about, the radiation's not good for you, you would not.
They don't just offer you more money, and they just won't give you the job.
You will not be hired. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying why people should send this notice to the power company.
Right.
But then you're also saying if they send the notice, the power company might say, "Fine, we'll just turn your power off." So how did you reconcile those things?
We've just recently I solved that problem. But here's the final note on sending the notice. I started to explain this, that it could be called negligence. It could be a coincidence when they're violating your rights or making you sick or causing harm. When you send the notice and you accuse them of doing it, and it's on record with proof of service, like certified mail,
right,
and that thing happens that you just accused them of,
yeah,
it's now gross negligence. It's now malfeasance. It's now failure to serve the public interest. It's intentional and willful criminal endangerment of the public. So just that simple notice turns what could be considered a random act into a criminal act. And so whenever one of those notices hits a power company, just one notice to the CEO, anybody who has this problem could come back with their neighbor's notice and say, wait a minute, you were noticed on this. You were informed. Here's a certified letter 6 months ago that you were told this. Doesn't even matter if you sent the notice yourself. One of those notices pretty much puts that entire every employee, every officer, and the company itself, the corporation itself, in major liability. And of course, that's what InPower is doing. But
I was going to say that's the basis of the notice of liability.
Right. But my approach is a little different, and I'll answer your question that you asked about what we're doing now. My approach with the notices, and this will never change, is send the notice. We have notices at this other website, by the way. Let me mention this. You might want to post this one. This is where all the solutions are now. It's not freedomtaker.com anymore. I still have some good information and download documents there. But the one that I'm building that's really got the fresh information and the new approach and some really good information is emfhelpcenter.com. So that stands for electromagnetic frequencies. So it's EMF. Help, H-E-L-P, center.com. And
center is spelled out, right?
Yeah, C-E-N-T-E-R.
Okay.
EMF, H-E-L-P, C-E-N-T-E-R.com. Okay. And what I've got there now, this is the new thing. I realized that nobody was getting any legal justice. And they were getting power shut off. They were getting arrested. I said, okay, what? There's nobody holding utility companies or their employees or officers accountable for anything they do. It's bizarre. I have to tell people, you have to think of these people as criminals. You don't enter into contract with criminals. You don't negotiate with criminals. Criminal is criminal. You don't compromise with criminals. They're hurting you. And it's very hard. I have to kind of explain this. I get calls every day. I'm explaining this. I say, you have to get your head around this because we're all so conditioned to think of a utility company employee as just somebody who's trying to serve us and give us electricity. And it's not that way anymore. They want surveillance, and they want to do it illegally and dangerously. So that's a whole different game. So what we're doing now, I went through every hazard and problem of these meters. I like to say radiation, fire hazard, surveillance, dirty electricity. Those are the big four right there. And I said, well, okay, we got to deal with every one of these, but how about if we deal with them in a way where we don't go into head-on confrontation with our power company? How if we deal with it in a way that we are empowered ourselves, so we're handling the problem ourselves? And I can tell you, I can go quickly through each one and give you the rough.
That would be really good. Yeah.
Just quickly the rough idea, but there's much better information on the website than I'll be able to capsulize now.
Okay.
But okay, radiation. We talk about shielding. And shielding is a tricky business. There are ways to do it, ways not to do it. People don't know this. When you put up a shield between you and a smart meter, it could be. They have special curtain material, but a metal window screen works. Tin foil, aluminum foil works. Other types of metallic sheets can work. So we have a paint that you can paint the wall, and it shields the wall. If you don't do it right, you could make yourself real sick. Because imagine if you shield your whole room, and you forget to shield the floor, and you've got dirty electricity coming up from the floor, and you're in a shielded box.
That's a microwave oven in a way,
You're getting cooked. It's very dangerous. So what I tell people generally, if I'm just casually advising someone, shield one wall, between you and the meters or you and the source. Get a scanning meter, find out where the sources are, make sure you're not making it worse. So, but to be real safe, if you're going to do shielding, you need to consult a building biologist. We have at emfhelpcenter.com, we have a partner, building biologist, Orem Miller, excellent, highly educated and experienced in radio frequency protection and environmental protection from radiation. So that's one guy you can call. We have his phone number there, but they're all over the country. They're all over the world. It's basically a new industry, environmental building. They call it biology or building biology. Okay. But you can do quite a bit of shielding in a pretty safe way. But the one common thing that people have to know is that every time you shield anything, it has to be grounded. And so you're connecting, even the paint they put on the walls, they put a metal plate and take a wire from that and take it to a ground plug or a water pipe or something like that. It has to be grounded. Otherwise, it's just bouncing around and doubling itself. So the grounding is what kind of sucks it away. And so that's a key thing. Okay, so shielding, there's a lot you can do. The first thing I tell anybody that cares about this or knows about it, especially those who have any electromagnetic sensitivity in their family, is you got to have a scanning meter. And those are affordable. The one that we like is the Cornet ED88T. That's on the website right there at emfhelpcenter.com. It's just a link to Amazon where you can buy it. And it's under $200, and it scans radio frequencies, electric fields, and magnetic fields. It's a tremendously versatile meter. You may know about that. So that's a essential tool to analyze, because especially if you're going to do shielding, because if you don't know if you can't read the exposures, it's completely invisible. You can't see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, feel it. So you need the meter. And if you start shielding a lot without the meter, you have no idea what you're doing, and you could be causing problems for yourself or someone else. So radiation surveillance. Okay, so surveillance. I'm working with a company called Static, which makes a wonderful whole house line conditioner. And this thing is something you get when you want to eliminate your dirty electricity. But it has a little added feature, and that is that this particular model of inline line cleaning, elimination of dirty electricity, transients, whatever you call, it also has capacitors in it that are arranged in a certain way to where they sort of scrub the surveillance. And so it's not obvious or clear to the power company what device you turn on at what time, because the capacitors, you know what a capacitor is? It's like a battery. It'll store some energy and then deliver it on an even. You can deliver it on a paced manner. So that's defeating some of this surveillance. I don't know if all of it or even how much of it, because I'm not an electrical engineer, but I know it gives you an advantage in terms of not being as exposed to the surveillance. But
the power company would know that something like that's being used, right? Because they're not getting any good data from your house.
Right.
So wouldn't they show up and say, we need to investigate and see what's messing up your electric system?
They would not dare do that. If they show up, you tell them, I have a line conditioner. It's downstream from the meter. It's on my jurisdiction, not yours. Get the hell off my property, or I'll call 911 and I'll have you arrested for trespass. Don't ever come here asking questions about what I have and what I plug in. That's my business. And so there's a line between the power company's jurisdiction and your jurisdiction, and that line is the electric meter. So when that power is coming down from the pole, that's their business. When it hits your smart meter, that's their business. When it comes out of your smart meter, it's your business, and it's your electricity. You're paying for it. It's yours. You do what you want with it.
You have that conditioner listed on the site you just mentioned?
Yeah, that's right at the top. It's called the Power Perfect box, I think, and it's like $1,100 something. It's not cheap, but if this is your investment to not have to go into a legal battle with your power company about this stuff, to not go head to head in a confrontation with a monster.
So I wonder what they would do if, they make, oh, and by the way, before I ask that question, I'm assuming one of those boxes handles all the circuits in the house.
That's right. This is called a whole house line conditioner, and it goes between the meter and the service panel. So it's everything going. The service panel breaks out into your circuits.
It's right up close to the meter, basically.
Yeah, but
it's on your side.
First thing, exactly. First thing that the electricity hits past the meter is your line conditioner.
Okay, so the question is, one of the things they say is so wonderful about the smart meter that is just going to really improve your life is that you get to have, if you use the electricity wisely to save the earth, that by getting up at 3 a.m. and doing everything you would normally do, then you're going to save so much money. And what they're not saying is that what it really means is that if you use the electricity during normal hours, you're going to pay extra. So they have an interest in making sure you do. And if you're really, getting, I don't know what you would call it, but getting in the way of this wonderful program so that they can't even tell how to give you this wonderful deal. I wonder what they do in cases like that. What rate would they charge you for everything? Because it's all the same.
Right. I don't think it moves everything on time of day use. They know your gross usage at a certain time of day, but they can't read the appliance profile as easily.
Okay.
So they will.
The detailed surveillance is blocked, but they can still give you that special deal of time of use and everything.
Right. And I'm not an electrical engineer. I don't want to make any claims about how much of the surveillance data is blocked. That's going to be in the future for me to research and find out and talk with this company, SATIC, about and get more information on that. The idea, the impression that I have now is that they can't eliminate all of it. But, that's what I want to find out is how much they are really cleaning and eliminating and what advantage that gives you in terms of privacy. Because if this doesn't give you enough privacy, we're going to have to come up with other ways to do it. And I've already talked to this particular company and others about literally creating a product that's for that reason, that purpose, and nothing else, to defeat illegal surveillance committed by utility companies. Right. And there is a black box you could make to do that.
And of course, it's not just the meter. You've also got all the new appliances cooperating too, right? They have cameras and microphones in them and all kinds of special data collectors. And
smart appliances.
I wonder if there's a way to take away that aspect of an appliance when you buy it. Is there anybody getting into that emerging black market of debugging appliances?
I don't know if there's any major industry starting, but there's a YouTube video that I saw. I wish I had a link to it, where the guy just opened the back of his refrigerator, found the Zigbee chip, and pulled it out. and I'm sure that the manufacturers, at some point will try to figure out some way to where you can't take out the surveillance chip without taking out, something.
Yeah, making it stop working, basically.
The ice maker, They'll have some way of disrupting that. But in the meantime, if you go into an appliance store and you say, I need a refrigerator with no spyware, no smart jazz.
I doubt that most of them even know about the spyware, do they?
They will. They will, because sooner or later, your power company or somebody is going to start sending you information like, you're running out of ice cream.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because
and you like this flavor better than that one.
Yeah. Ralph's Supermarket just got in a bunch of cherry vanilla, which is your favorite. So head on down. Oh yeah, you'll start to get things because more and more products are getting sort of RFID barcodes, and that can be read by your smart appliance, and that can be transmitted to your smart meter and to the rest of the world.
And if all these people are the workers, then somebody like Alexa is the foreman, right?
Yeah. Alexa, if you have an Alexa and you haven't thought about the surveillance capacities of that, maybe we're wasting our time telling everyone about the. Yeah.
Well, another aspect of the whole thing too is when you leave your house, you don't have to worry about not providing the surveillance data because you're in a wireless car. And those are becoming more and more.
Well, they're tracking cars. Every new car has more than one tracking device for different purposes and different agencies. Oh, yeah, it's
right. And they have a black box that's going to be used for taxing by the mile and that sort of thing too, to save the earth. Though.
Right.
So I'm wondering if there are people that are going to be able to start debugging new cars.
Oh yeah, there'll be a huge industry. But again, like I was going to say, as awareness grows, when you walk into a place and ask for a refrigerator with no smart gadgets in it, and they say, no, they all have it. And you say, okay, I'll go somewhere else. I'll go to a used appliance store and look for a 30-year-old refrigerator.
That's why they're making those illegal, because they hurt the earth.
Well, you can't make a refrigerator illegal. Again, this is a device that nobody has any business knowing you even have. And so, you will, there will be some black market thing happen, refrigerators from Mexico. Somebody will solve this. But what I was going to say, and it's the same thing with an automobile. The more of us who walk into these places and say, I will not buy anything that spies on me. End of story. Right. I'm gonna come up with a workaround. Even if that was 10% of the population that would do that. Right. That would be an absolute massive, drop in revenues for that industry. Basically the surveillance industry and all the appliances and cars that go along with it. You're not just denying the purchase of a surveillance device to spy on you. Paying for somebody to spy on you. You're denying the whole purchase of the car. This is major economic. You would call it equivalent to civil disobedience. You say, no, I won't buy this thing. It spies on me. And I know that I'm paying for this surveillance device. I'm not going to pay for that.
It's going to be a contest between the people who are saying, no, I don't want to be radiated in the car, and government saying, how can we make it so that they have no choice?
Oh, yeah. Well, government and, of course, industry. Industry is the real driver. See, government is really just accomplice to all this.
Well, or it might be one department of the industry, because now government as legal organizations is like courts. They're actually legally for-profit businesses, right?
Right. They're for-profit businesses, and by God, they do want this surveillance and all of this stuff. Whatever is coming in on this is duplicated to the NSA, is duplicated to the CIA. Edward Snowden made that very clear. They have no shame and no hesitation in sucking up this data and putting algorithms on it. And, my favorite story is the one of the hypothetical woman, the single mother with two small children, who takes her children to church group and PTA meetings 4 or 5 times a week. And she uses her hairdryer before she goes. And the algorithm of the power company sees a single mother with 2 small children using her hairdryer 4 times a week and says, this is a partier. This is a drug user. This is a drinker. This is someone who goes out every night and leaves her kids at home. So let's bash in her door with Child Protective Services and just do a little checkup on this. Yeah. And you know what kind of hell anything Child Protective Services does is motivated by, we make money by stealing children. That's CPS. And that's not somebody you want visiting you. But your algorithms, the algorithms could interpret what you're doing as child abuse easily. Just
well, that's why they're removing humans from those decision-making positions as fast as they can get algorithms and computer-based systems in there.
There's no way humans could keep up with it. The algorithms are deciding what something is, interpreting it, providing, analysis. The state of Ohio, I know, bashes indoors regularly. If anything, they use smart meter data because it's cheaper than patrolling. They admit, these law enforcement admit that they don't even patrol. They just go on Facebook and they find people who talk about, drugs or something. And the state of Ohio loves to go in on smart meter data only and kick in the door of some place because it might be a grow house. That's, a big thing now in Ohio. And so, how easy could it, you could have a hot tub and look like you had a grow house,
Yeah. Yeah. And the idea that you can't grow what you want anyway is a very strange idea with government.
Yeah, yeah. Cannabis, the whole other thing. Yeah.
So a lot of this could be seen as kind of coordinated under something like Agenda 21.
Oh, yeah.
Or what Agenda 21 reflects, something even deeper than that.
Mass surveillance.
Yeah.
That's what utility meters are now purposed for, is mass surveillance, and it's global, and never before has have the powers that be had the opportunity to put a surveillance device on every home that gives them the information of what is going on in that house,
right,
24/7,
right,
and so this has been a dream for probably 100 years or at least 50 years since IBM, was assisting Germany with intern camp statistics. Right. That they saw the power of surveillance. Hitler only had two pieces of information: whether or not you're a Jew and whether or not you have a gun.
Yeah.
That's all he needed to do what he did. And so surveillance is extremely dangerous. And you think, well, so what if somebody knows I have a gun? So what if somebody knows I'm Jewish? Well, we know but you hear that all the time. Well, I have nothing to hide. And Edward Snowden actually put it perfectly. He said, you have nothing to hide, but you have a lot to protect. And you don't disclose things, and you protect your family, you protect yourself, your privacy, your security. And if secrecy wasn't a powerful thing, why would the government be doing so much of it?
Yeah, exactly. They want complete secrecy for themselves.
Well, they want to know every single thing about us. If you don't, that fact alone should tell any average person who's capable of critical thinking, oh, maybe I do have something to protect, and maybe privacy does have value.
Right. And I think when people say they have nothing to hide, they also don't understand the history of governments and what they've been doing. And for the last, hundreds of years, and probably a lot longer than that, thousands really. But the other thing is that corporations now are indistinguishable from government and from media too, because the major media is just a department of the corporate complex, really.
Yeah. Whenever you hear the term public-private partnership, run. That's the definition
of fascism, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, according to Mussolini, it is.
Yeah.
And he should know. So
yeah, he did really well with it.
Yeah.
So the question
for a while.
Yeah. Well, he had some problems later on that have to be worked out, but it seems like they're working those out, as fast as they can right now. So all these things come down to aspects of what's the best response on the part of the people who are victimized and targeted by this stuff.
Right. Yeah. So this idea of that we were talking about, let's circle back to the smart meters and the surveillance, is put them on notice of criminal trespass and just have that on the record, because if anything happens, now you've got an open and shut case. And then look at these ways at emfhelpcenter.com to do this without the confrontation, to protect yourself. So I didn't get all the way through the list. We had radiation. We talked about shielding and this and that. Yeah. We talked about a little bit of shielding. Surveillance, we have some protections on that with the line conditioner. And, the big one that I don't want to stop the list, but let's go back to the big one. Remind me.
After the list, we'll go back to that.
Yeah, I got another solution here, but it's sort of a big step. But just the average person who's dealing with the health problems, the surveillance problems, privacy, shielding, whatever. Okay, the fire hazard. I've tried to figure out what we can do, and the best that I can think of offhand is that the shielding can shield that too, actually, and it's kind of an oddball solution. But if you had some kind of a cone-shaped collar around your meter, the thing is going to explode. It's going to burn. If there's a surge on your line, and there's a surge on most power grid systems, on average, twice a year, maybe twice a year. Some places get them more. When you got the smart meter, the surge on the line, remember with no surge protector, the surge comes into your house and pops all your appliances. You know, I have friends who had, the power company had to replace like 6 appliances per apartment in this one area because they just bam, 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 no surge protection. So there's a lot of problems. So, but at the very least, at the very minimum, you look at your electric meter and you say, what if this thing exploded in flames right now? Is there a bush nearby that could catch on fire? Is there wood slats right above it? You know, what do we got here? And so they explode like hand grenades. Sometimes the glass or Lexan plastic, whatever, just flies out in shards. So you don't want to have that area where your children play. You don't want to have children playing there. You don't want to have a lot of, time spent there. Don't put your patio furniture right next to that thing. And there could be a mechanical shielding, like a small fireproof fence, 5 feet wide, just like 3 feet up, out from your smart meter, and that could also be your radiation shielding. So you don't want to shield away from the house. People put these screens over the meter. That's not smart at all. It keeps the radiation off your neighbor, but it defeats the data. It defeats the data transfer while it's still in power company jurisdiction. So they can hit you for that.
Right.
They're entitled to the data coming out of that thing. And you're agreeing to that by accepting electric service. What happens below the meter is your business. But you can't put the screen over your meter and get away with that forever. People do say that it cuts down on the transmissions, but you've got to shield it in a way that if it's the meter itself, it's not your property. You can't tamper with it, so you have to let it transmit somewhere. So try to let it transmit somewhere harmless. But let's talk for a minute about, we talked about dirty electricity. That's the line conditioner. There's also plug-in line conditioners. I've found that there are robust ones and there are ones that are not too exciting. And I don't like to name names. There's some really popular plug-in dirty electricity filters, and this company recommends you get like 30 of them, and they're $35 a piece. It's a huge expense, and some people don't like them and say they don't really do it, and they're not really filtering, they're compressing, so it looks like less dirty electricity. There's several brands, actually, those little plug-in ones. The company that I mentioned before, Satic, makes a much bigger, more robust one, a plug-in line filter. So if somebody can't afford the whole house line conditioner, they can get a plug-in one. Now, these are more expensive. They're like $200.
And that has to be for every circuit. You need one of those, right?
Yeah, I would imagine that's how it works. I've heard that 2 or 3 of these bigger ones pretty much clean up a house. And I think the way they do that is that you generally don't have a lot of circuits that are causing problems. There's going to be 2 or 3 circuits that really cause the problems. And that's because you're occupying the space where those circuits go the most of the time, like your circuit to your garage or your attic, or places, there's places where you don't really hang out that long. Right. So you don't have to worry about it as much. So you apply the line filter to the circuits that are the dirtiest, and you read that with scanning meters. And we do like a meter, Greenwave. The company Greenwave makes a dirty electricity meter. It's a plug-in meter. And they look really similar to the filters. But there's a meter and a filter. And the meter tells you how much dirty electricity you have, and the filter is supposed to fix it. So there's 2 different devices you need to really manage the problem. So the Greenwave filter is very good. And even the Satic company that makes electronic devices recommends the Greenwave filter, Greenwave meter, dirty electricity meter. And we do have that posted on emfhelpcenter.com. And so that way it's got a digital readout, and it's very accurate and very good information with that. So that's one way to know about that. And then the plug-in filters, I think the average house would only need 2 or 3 of these larger ones that we have to really, pretty much handle, 90% of the problem.
Okay. And I don't think we really finished the fire question because you were saying you can't, block the fire expansion by going around the meter because that's not your property. So you've got to prevent the fire behind the meter somehow. A lot of these meters are stuck on the walls of houses. So what do you do about the fire issue with that?
If you're back east, it's much more dangerous. Back east and in cold climates, they put the meters inside houses or in basements or in garages.
Okay.
And they don't want them out in the freezing cold, and they don't, man, I don't know what you're going to do. The most important thing is to tell the utility company that, in writing to the CEO, we must have surge protection on any electric device installed in our home or on our property. We must have it, and you got to do it. And
right, but then they come back and say, well, fine, sorry, we'll just turn your power off.
Right. But when they start getting these notices, this may be, the most immediate and worst thing. Mm-hmm. When you tell them, literally, there are tens of thousands of fires nationally a year from this. If you go on Google and you say smart meter fire, you search, or I'm sure they'll start to suppress this, but I went out just to get pictures for a video, and there's thousands of pictures. When somebody's meter explodes on their house, they go out and they take a cell phone shot of it, and they put it on Facebook or something. There's thousands of pictures, and so the utilities cannot deny that this is a problem. You can go to the internet and see it, and to look at these. It's meter after meter after meter, and it's just this. Some of them have plastic covers, and they're melted down the side of the house. They're all black, and there's burned, smoke stains up to the eave, and then of course there's a certain number of them that burn the whole house down, and they have pictures of that. Smart meter fire. Here you go. So for these power companies really have nowhere to hide. They're going to be badly damaged financially by this, because imagine that. If you have a meter fire and you bring a lawsuit, you can come up with thousands of people. You just go out on the web and search meter fire, smart meter fire, and you have 5,000 witnesses. This is such a bad problem, and so the pretense that, if they get in collusion with the insurance companies and the fire department and everybody else, and everybody's lying about it, and they're, like you say, they're stealing burned meters off of houses to tamper with evidence, and somehow, for some reason, nobody's getting prosecuted for that. It's just all this bizarre stuff. They still have the problem that tens of thousands of people have personally had their utility meter explode off the side of their house. So how can you hide from this forever? It's just a matter of time. So I would tell everybody, first of all, please collect evidence. Please put it out on the internet. Please save it on your computer. Please back it up. And one of the things I think that I'm going to work on in the future is a lot of networking, and it may be in a blockchain manner, or maybe, like on Ethereum or somewhere where people can contact other people, people can find resources, and we have to have some way of networking for some of these problems, because that's the only way that the power companies will be overpowered, is by numbers and people getting together in groups. If you imagine if at a city council meeting or a regulator's public meeting, you had 500 people show up, each of them holding up the picture of their meter that was exploded in flames.
Yeah. Even city council people might have to become somewhat conscious.
And city council can make an ordinance in a second to prohibit that kind of thing. They must have surge protectors. Well,
the other thing is, for the moment, if the meter is on the side of your house, you can't get behind the meter to shield that. Would it help to put a metal plate, all around the exposed wood that you could find?
Well, that's what I'm saying. For the fire, you want to protect the outside of the house. It generally goes to the outside. Now, it is burning within the wall. Those things are recessed. So the wiring goes in the wall. So the fire, the heat, a lot of it goes in the wall. So what you're going to do by fire protection outside is you're going to delay the fire by a certain amount of time. But inside, and this is what I tell people about shielding. I was talking earlier, you don't put the mesh or the shield on the outside necessarily because you're just protecting your neighbor. So how do you shield? Well, the radiation, the transmitted radio frequencies are coming in the house, and that's high energy density weaponized pulsed radiation designed to penetrate walls. It has to for the data to get around. So if it penetrates walls, what's it doing to your body? So what I recommend to people is shielding the inside of the wall at the meter position.
I can see that, but not for fire, right?
Right. The fire is going to go outside, and you have to look at how you would deal with collaring the thing. If you can picture like a sort of a bowl or a dish collar around your meter. So flames are basically margined from the actual maybe flammable structure. If you've got stucco or something, your biggest danger would be the eaves and the roof, where it comes over. So you could easily put a 45-degree metal panel where any flames going up would not ignite the eave. It's a little clumsy. You got to go to the sheet metal company and get some galvanized whatever and maybe paint it or whatever you want to do. But it's a DIY project, and not everybody can do that. But it may be to where your local carpenter or your local fix-it man could handle that easily. Say, I need some metal shielding here in case there was a fire.
Now, one of the things some power companies are doing when people say they don't want the smart meter and there's an opt-out provision, at least for the moment until they can get rid of it, they won't give you an analog meter anymore, and they'll claim you show them they're easily available, and they said, well, we're not allowed to, it won't work with our system, but we'll give you a non-analog, non-transmitting meter. What do you know about those?
They're just as bad in most ways. So in other words, I'm going to transmit less. I'm going to give you a meter that I can turn on anytime I want without notifying you. They do this all the time. They say this is a non-transmitting meter. Well, they're all the same. They just turn off the transmitter, and they turn them on and off remotely. You don't even know when it goes back on. And the lying and the misrepresentation and fraud is phenomenal, because they know they're immune from prosecution, basically. So they just lie whenever it suits them. So here's what you're getting. You're getting, they're telling you you're not getting radiation. You probably are. But what are you also getting? Surveillance, dirty electricity, and fire hazard. They don't, they just say we're transmitting less. So I always like to say, well, when there's 4 problems, you're not fixing that by addressing one of the problems. Right. So what it is fraud. So this is something we're way up on. You go to emfhelpcenter.com, free download, notice of fraud. If they offer you an opt-out program, and that opt-out program does not offer you at no cost, because electromagnetic meters are far less expensive than electronic meters.
Right.
An electromechanical meter, which is the safe and lawful flavor, then that is a fraud. That is fraud. It is not an opt-out. You're still getting surveillance. You're still getting fire hazard. You're still getting dirty electricity. It's fraud. If you say that's an opt-out, you're lying. It's not.
So you want a meter with one of those turning wheels in it, right?
Yeah. Now I'm going to help your viewers with this confusion. They will tell you, we'll give you an analog meter. To the power company, an analog meter means an electronic meter that has some electromechanical parts. So that's a big lie. Landis+Gyr makes a meter that's a Trojan horse meter, an imposter meter. It looks like a electromechanical meter, and it has a little secret compartment full of electronics that spy on you. And if they didn't know they were doing something wrong, why would they hide it? Why would they make an imposter meter? They're just making themselves obviously criminals. So what you do is you say, here's a notice. If you're going to send an opt-out, it has to be this. But when they tell you the opt-out and what it is, it's obvious it's fraud. So we have a notice of fraud. and you say, you have just committed fraud. You've offered us this, and what we asked for was that, and you misrepresented it as this, and that actually puts us at harm and hazard. So that's fraud with damages, and that's a major notice. And it's one they have to rebut, or they go into acquiescence by silence.
Which they don't rebut, you said, right?
Never. And, they can't.
But they do try to turn your power off, and I don't know if there's anything for people to do about that at this point.
Right. And again, it's even if you can't protect yourself from the dangers and the hazards, you can at least protect yourself in the way to where if something goes wrong, you have put them on notice, and now what they're doing is not an accident, it's gross negligence. Once they're noticed of it, and this is what's going to bring the power companies down. If enough people send them notices, imagine if they have a couple of thousand, in a town like Burbank, where I used to live, 100,000 people. So they've got a couple of thousand people that were smart enough to just send in a notice and just put it on record. Right. Certified mail. Here's what I see you're doing. You're committing crimes, and if anything goes wrong, you're liable. So now that they've got a couple of thousand $50 million lawsuits, if your house burns down or even burns at all, that's obviously a major public hazard. If you noticed them in advance that you thought they were causing that hazard, and then it burned, and this will happen many, many times. Eventually, over 10 years or whatever, in a city the size of Burbank, you could have easily dozens, if not hundreds, of houses that are damaged by these meters in one way or another. So every one of those could file a major lawsuit. So what's going to happen in the future, same thing that happened to tobacco, asbestos, DDT. As soon as there's enough bodies in the street, as soon as there's enough correlation between what the power company is doing and the harm that's being caused, game over. The lawsuits can only go so high. Now, here's the bad news. It's $2.2 trillion a year, the revenue just from electric service. They said that they're going to more than double they're going to make more money on the data they're collecting than on the electricity they're selling. So now we're at $4.4 trillion a year industry, obviously one of the biggest industries in the country. And so and all of the wireless industries, the refrigerators, the smart meters, the smart appliances, the whatever, that probably doubles it, or maybe half again. You might be up to $5 or $6 trillion a year industry of all the wireless and stuff that relates. And then there's the data. The data is the other, is part of that. So look at the amount of money. Tobacco never came close to that. Asbestos, DDT, lead in paint. These are things they banned, but the size of the industry was a tiny fraction of what this is. The $5 or $6 trillion industry that if they started giving people safe and lawful meters, they would lose $4 trillion of that. So right. 4 trillion, I mean, a lot of people can't imagine what a trillion is. A trillion is 1,000 billion, a billion's 1,000 million, a million's 1,000 thousand. I mean, it's just money beyond imagination. And they can, like Catherine Austin Fitts says, they can do an entire deep space program to Mars with a couple of $1 trillion. So they can afford to buy governments, basically. That's the point I'm making. They can buy anything they want. They can prolong this much longer than they did tobacco, asbestos, DDT, lead, and paint. They can kick the can down the road because they can control media. They can control the legal system, the justice system. They can control laws and government and legislatures and legislators. They can control it all with that. That kind of money buys everything. It buys countries, buys global. So is that part of the reason that people who have their power turned off in retaliation for a notice can't really do very much about that, right, at this point? Right. And that's why it's like, think of a way to make it better for yourself. Think of what you can do. Everything at that website, the emfhelpcenter.com, is about empowering yourself, and not going into a confrontation with a major corporation. And in the center column, it's titled Solutions. The left column is just kind of the problem, explaining some of the problems. And the other side, the right column, is these products, that you can get to help some of the problems. But the center column at EMF Health Center, solutions, and people look at it. I've had people look at it and say, "Oh, I'm overwhelmed." It's like goes way, way down, but it's a narrow column. It's only maybe 2 pages worth of information, but it's loaded with links and downloads, document downloads.
Right.
It's sprinkled all through. And
I don't think people are endangering themselves at all by following that kind of advice. I think the only conflict is going to come up when you're saying, let's not have a direct conflict with a major corporation, and you're also saying send them notices, because those are contradictory things, right?
Well, no. The notice is the notice of liability, and it's a little more on the side of the in-power strategy. So we're not telling them, I refuse your meter. We're telling them that if you put that meter on, you're fully liable. You're a criminal. You're trespassing. You're harming us. And here's your notice.
And you think they wouldn't likely turn your power off for that?
No, because you haven't refused their service. You haven't violated any terms of their easement. There's nothing. No, you've just told them, here's what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm sorry to ask you that so many times, but I think that's really a critical issue. If they're not going to come and kill you or turn your power off for giving them the notice, then there's really no reason not to do it, right? If that's true.
If they retaliate against you for accusing them of being a criminal, they are confirming your allegation.
Because you're not asking them to do anything, right?
They're confirming your allegation. If I wasn't a criminal, why would I turn off your electricity? I turn off your electricity because I don't want to be liable for the damage you've accused me of doing. I am admitting.
But you're not asking them to do anything.
No.
So they can't retaliate on that basis of that.
Right.
They would be retaliating because they're offended at being called a criminal or something, I guess.
Well, being offended is not cause for shutting off someone's electricity. You have to have a reason, and it has to be that you're not paying your bill. And in the case of some people, it has to be the reason that you have sent their own electronic utility meter back to them in a box and put on your own electromechanical one. And that's, in their view, a violation in terms of service. They say, oh, we haven't certified that meter, whatever their policies are.
Right.
Yeah, right. You're violating policies. So the idea is to tell them that their policies are a liability to them.
Okay. And this same principle, just like InPower, one of the things about InPower is they say, if we can get this thing to work with smart meters, which is where they started, then it'll work against 5G. It'll ultimately maybe work against even something hard to reach physically like chemtrails. So, but the 5G is starting now. And if we're worried about the transmission of smart meters, 5G is like a ray directed right at you.
Yeah.
And everybody else's transmitters too. So I can see a transferability of what you're talking about to some degree.
Oh yeah. But it's all about prior notice and then correlation. So you got to be able to show why the 5G transmitter right out your house gave your daughter cancer. You have to show that was, so you get your scanning meter and you measure it, and then you get the reports on biological effects of radiation, and there it is. It's all there. You can get it. It just takes.
So do you have to wait until somebody in your family gets cancer, or can you do it based on the knowledge that's out there now before somebody have to die from it?
The way that the power companies are behaving at this point in history, you have to wait until someone gets cancer. And you have to sue them, and there have to be thousands of you doing it. That's how they're behaving. When a criminal doesn't want to correct their criminal behavior, somebody's going to get hurt.
Okay, and so you have to get a doctor that's not going to tell you that it's caused by bad genetics and forget it. You're crazy. You're not even a doctor yourself.
Right.
There are some of them that are brave enough to go beyond that, I think.
Well, there's some of them that are smart enough that know about biological effects of radiation. There's a lot of doctors who are pathetically ignorant. Like to be a doctor and not to imagine that radiation could hurt anybody. Why are we wearing lead aprons when we're getting x-rays at the dentist? Come on.
Right.
Figure this out.
Okay, well, I think your website sounds like an incredible resource. Before we wrap up, I want to remind you that besides the 4 on that list, you said you were going to go back to the big one.
Okay,
So
get off grid, go solar. That's what I did. Go wind and or solar and or hydro, whatever you got, make electricity out of it. And that's a big step. And that's why it's the big one. It takes investment.
Well, that's also the basis of another show, I think.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
If you're interested in getting into that.
Off-grid living is a whole new, field of study, a whole new art form. Look up Michael Reynolds' Earth Ships, if you know about that. That's how to build a house with passive heating and cooling and with completely self-sufficient. He calls it Earth Ship because you could drop it anywhere in the world and it would function like a house, but without any utilities. And you got your own solar and this and that. He's got what you do with your collecting rainwater, this and that, filtering water. It's more work than I want to do. I'm in an area that gets enough rain and has good well sources. And so I have a well and I have water, so I'm fine there. I have what I call small tank propane. I don't want a monthly bill for propane. I don't want trucks coming onto my property. I just go out and fill a few tanks once in a while. And I've got my house, I call it my cabin, structured to live that way. And then and electricity is solar. I've got 24 panels, and I mounted that off on my property. Luckily, I've got property out in the country. I've got 20 acres. I got all this room, so I didn't have to put the panels on my roof. That's unfortunate that the ideal solution in the city is panels on the roof. It does complicate roof work and it complicates solar panel work. Both, it's kind of putting two things in one place, and it's a little tricky. But you want to get a roof that hopefully needs very little maintenance. You want to get solar panels that don't fail. The general rule of thumb in solar panels is that polymer ones, they come up with these fancy ones that look like roof tiles. Well, they're polymers. They're not glass. Make sure they're glass. Glass lasts 20 years plus. Polymers last 5 years minus. So
wow, that's interesting. Okay.
Plastic doesn't do well in sunlight.
Yeah, and eventually we'll break through the barriers to the sources of clean energy that are far beyond solar and wind. And we know that those have been available for about 100 years now, fully perfected. And the people who try to expose them tend to commit suicide in really strange ways. They tend to have odd ways of dying and dying young. I wanted to mention, by the way, if somebody's sort of thinking in the back of their mind about off-grid and solar, I have a free download document that's really useful. For the person who's kind of starting out or just wants to know, how do I approach this and not get in trouble? You'll get in a lot of trouble if you go to these full-service solar companies. They'll charge you double for everything. They'll add sales commissions. They'll want to loan you the money and charge you interest. They'll take your rebate from you and you'll never see it. They're just the crookedest bunch of clowns I've ever seen. So I do recommend people go to, there's a place in Northern California or somewhere in that area, Wholesale Solar. They'll help you with your wiring diagram. You buy your panels, your inverter, your charge controller. They'll tell you everything you need. They'll just ask you roughly how big your house is or how much energy you consume relative to your neighbor. And you can kind of DIY it. You hire an electrician to do the hard stuff. You hire maybe a carpenter to maybe build a shed to protect your batteries and your inverter if you need that, if you can't put it in the garage. You need to have venting for your batteries. There's certain little tricks you want to know so you don't start heading down the wrong path. And let me give you that real clearly. freedomtaker.com, and right on the home page, just scroll down a little bit, and there's a free download. Just click it, and it talks about off-grid solar. And it's about 3 or 4 page document. And it explains the kind of thing that I was just talking about, how you can avoid the real pitfalls. If you don't know anything about it, you're going to head off in a wrong direction, and it's going to cost you money, or you're never going to get your solar working right. So this document that I have gets you on the right path. You know what you're looking for. You know kind of how it's all got to work together, and you have some links and stuff where you can get things that you need. So I recommend that highly for anybody who's hasn't done a whole lot of research yet on solar. Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Freedomtaker.com, and then the other one, EMF geoengineeringhelpcenter.com, and maybe you can, if you feel like it, come back and do a separate show on off-grid power too. That would be a pretty neat thing, I think.
I'm living that. I've been living that way for about 5 years now, and I am collecting. I have even, I think, a PowerPoint on that. The whole off-grid thing. You could go for days. I mean, that's a whole different way of living. That's how the pioneers lived, and they knew how to grow food. They knew how to do stuff that we've forgotten. And I think if we want to survive, we're going to have to learn some of this stuff again.
Yeah, I do too. Well, that was a great beginning, and hopefully we'll do some more chapters in the future. And
sure.
Really appreciate you coming on. And hold on, and we'll say goodbye in the break here.
Sure, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, you guys, that was Jerry Day. That was really fun for us to get to meet Jerry and find out more about what he's doing. And he's obviously really trying to help humanity by information on the wireless stuff and the smart meters and a lot of other issues, and looking for practical ways that people can protect themselves and even get out of certain situations so they don't have to have all of the latest damaging technology hooked to their houses and things like that. I really appreciate getting to meet inspiring people like Jerry, and I'm sure we'll be in touch, and hopefully he'll come back and do a show on off-grid electric power and living in general, and I would be really interested to do that with him. In the meantime, do remember his sites. Let's see, emfhelpcenter.com, which I want to go to. It sounds really useful. And it's full of solutions on there, and I think you'll be able to keep up with Jerry's work. And apparently he's got other videos with him on the internet right now that I'm going to do some searching for. And in general, what he's talking about is, looking for solutions of how to survive with these giant corporations merged with governments, really all entities that are for-profit businesses, basically, and whether they're called government or industry or banks or courts or anything like that. And it's a real challenge to see how to have a normal existence with all those things kind of working together in collusion to dominate most parts of our life. And the surveillance is leading to control, which is leading to other things after that. And I guess it's just a question of, if you're going to be in this kind of environment and you want the best results in your life, do the education and study sites like Jerry's, learn from people like Jerry who have the experience in this kind of thing. We're doing something in parallel to Jerry, which I think is allied with his kind of work, and that's the exposure of forbidden aspects of health and consciousness also that you're not supposed to ever find out about. And they're delicate enough, so we've got them in a private platform called planetaryhealingclub.com. And part of the reason for that is that if you are willing to do the work to apply these principles that have been known since before the beginning of recorded history and apply them to your own body and your mind and different aspects of yourself, then you become capable of helping other people in ways that are really things that most people never even imagined. And it takes some work. It's not a spectator sport. But I'm really personally looking for the people that are up to doing that work and would like to share it with us on planetaryhealingclub.com. So you're personally invited if you're one of those people or think that you might be. It's some pretty neat stuff. And in the meantime, we'll continue putting up the public videos on all the major platforms, thanks to Doug is posting them all over the place, as long as we're allowed to. If we get banned off there by getting a little bit too off the edge, with stuff that you're not supposed to hear about, then our friend Mike has started Brighteon.com, which is Brighteon, like Bright New Era, Brighteon.com. And he's promised to keep those postings secure against censorship, and we'll still be there and on lostartsradio.com. And remember the Sunday night show every week on blogtalkradio.com. That's audio, but you can even hear it from the cell phone that you've got, not holding it against your head, though, hopefully. And I don't know, we just want to keep up as much as we can with bringing you all of this information in a form that you can actually use, and guests that are inspiring like Jerry, and we'll keep on that. And if you want to give us any feedback, check out the Facebook group for lostartsradio.com, or email us, Richard and or Doug at lostartsradio.com. Love to hear from you anytime, and hopefully we'll be talking to you very soon.
Introducing Lost Arts Radio Live, our new Saturday late afternoon, early evening 1-hour live stream show. This new show precedes our Planetary Healing Club, which starts at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific. The Planetary Healing Club, which is not free and open to the public, but you can join for a minimum donation of just $10 a month. Our new live stream show, which is free, starts Saturdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and 4:30 Pacific. It can be accessed by going to lostartsradio.com/live. You can tune into our live stream from our Facebook page at facebook.com/lostartsradio, from our YouTube channel at youtube.com/lostartsradio, as well as both Periscope and Twitter at Lost Arts Radio. You can ask questions during the show by using the chat function on YouTube, or make a comment on Facebook during the live stream. Once again, that's Lost Arts Radio Live, Saturdays at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. As of January 2018, the Saturday live call-in show is now an interactive video platform called the Planetary Healing Club. The cost is just a $10 minimum monthly donation, automatically billed through your PayPal account. Sign up at lostartsradio.com/club. The Planetary Healing Club is every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. You get your link to participate in the show upon signing up as a member. Those shows are also archived as well for club members. Listen to our new shows with guests every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. All Sunday shows with guests have archives freely available on our website at lostartsradio.com. You can also find them at blogtalkradio.com/lostartsradio, as well as our YouTube channel, youtube.com/C/lostartsradio. Mixcloud at mixcloud.com/lostartsradio. And finally, look us up under the podcast directory on iTunes. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/lostartsradio, or on Twitter at Lost Arts Radio. Be sure to join the free Lost Arts Radio Facebook group as well. Just search for Lost Arts Radio Group within Facebook. You can also join our forum on our website if you want to interact with other listeners. We also have links to all of the great independent musicians whose music we feature each week on Lost Arts Radio. When you do your Amazon shopping, please use Amazon's Smile program at smile.amazon.com. And when you choose Lost Arts Research Institute in Sedona, Arizona as your charity, Amazon will donate 0.5% of whatever your order total is to Lost Arts Research Institute to help fund the building of the school and keep our radio show on the air. Please visit lostartsresearchinstitute.org for more information on the school we want to build. Be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter on our site under the Radio Show tab, or right from the button on our Facebook page. Contact Richard at richard@lostartsradio.com, or myself, Doug Diamond, at doug@lostartsradio.com. Thanks again for listening to Lost Arts Radio, and we'll see you again next week.
Here in the dark, our skies, they're all the same. And in the night, your mind keeps playing games. But in the heart, a wish is just a dream. Time never waits, though harder it may seem. Don't you dare give in. Trust in the fear won't wait until you try again. easy and no use in letting go. If there was some other way to prove you'd make it, I wouldn't know. Until you try, you'll never know. You'll never know. Blind in the light, you think you see through me, but I found my soul, released and set it free. I hold in my hand the strength to bear it all. So bring on the fire. If my heart burns, I'll never fall. Don't you dare give in. Don't you dare stress the fear won't away. Until you try again, oh, you'll never know. Until you reach the end, no use in letting go. If there was some other way to prove you'd make it, I wouldn't know. Until you try, you'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. Reach higher, grow stronger, test of your own faith. Believe it, your heart will say. Until you try again, oh, you'll never know. Until you reach the end, no use in letting go. If there was some other way to prove you'd make it, I wouldn't know. Until you try, you'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. Here in the dark, our scars, they're all the same.